Welcome to the Way She Leads podcast, where we integrate strategy, intuition, and real life leadership so that you can create impact with more joy and ease without pushing, proving, or burning yourself out. Hi, I'm Megan Akatu, former corporate leader turned transformational coach, and I help women feel fully alive in their purpose in a way that ripples out through every area of their lives. If you've ever felt like there is a better way, you are not wrong and you are not alone. Each episode brings you conversations with experts and real leaders sharing tangible and holistic practices to help you lead your life in a way that actually feels good, not just looks good on paper. Welcome in. Hi, Laura. I'm so glad you're here.
Me too, Megan. How are you?
Doing great. Doing great. Today, we are here with Laura Ravo, who is an executive career and performance coach and also the COO of Shine Strategy. And Laura is a former retail executive who turned coach, and she also sits on several nonprofit boards and is very, very committed not only to those boards, but to actually doing the work on a weekly basis in New York City. And Laura and I met actually only about 18 months ago on a retreat through our coaching school. And she's just one of those people, like once you enter her world, you just never leave. She just wraps you in a huge warm hug. It begins with so much love. So today we are going to have a really fun conversation around influence. But before we jump in, Laura, can you tell us about how you became the Laura of today?
Boy, I don't even know where to begin with that. 30-year retail veteran turned executive coach about 2 years ago. So spent my early life in retail, fell in love with a very unorthodox career. And we'll talk about my coach in a minute when we talk about influence. But it was by the grace of God and the gift of my executive coach that about 2 years ago, I decided that I was better served and could better serve others as a coach. So about 2 years ago, she gifted me her business. And since then, I've been coaching women at inflection points. My other passion project is college juniors and seniors. So a gift to give back to those who are just about to explode into the world. And then my third lane is nonprofit. So however we can be of service to others in a bigger way. Thank you for asking.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, we're going to start with my experience of Laura not so long ago. Laura had invited me to run a board retreat for one of the nonprofit boards that she sits on. And just experiencing you, Laura, in this meeting. So Laura is there with her red lipstick, which she has on now. And she is open and you're very compassionate. So you're there like in a very loving way. And yet you speak very essentially, I would say. And my impression of you, or my experience of you, was it was a mostly male board, and you asked very powerful questions throughout the whole time that really kept us on track, that really got us to a bigger vision, a bigger place, that really kept us in the strategic space. But you did it not from like, I'm Laura Bravo and I'm the smartest person in the room. You did it with like this lightness and this openness, but this influence. And so my first question for you is this something you learned along the way, or is this just a natural gift that you've always had?
Well, thank you for the kind words. And thank you for the observation. It was a gift to have you help us facilitate that group. That one is near and dear. It is learned. It is learned for sure. So the intentionality took time. And if I look back, I do this with the students. Like if I look back to my 23-year-old self, I had a lot of swagger,
Which you need in New York.
which you need
Right.
in New York. But at 23, when you're in retail and you have a journalism degree, you should not have a lot of swagger. Part of it is, part of it is oldest child from an Italian Catholic family. You're raised in New York. I went to St. John's, and this is how Dad raised his number one girl. Right? You go out there and you exude confidence. My earlier years in my career were at Macy's, which was a very male-dominated environment. It was tough, but it's where I cut my operational teeth, which was great, and I wouldn't have changed it for the world. And then when I moved over to Victoria's Secret, and I entered on the beauty side, and the entire C-suite, except for the gentleman who ran supply chain, was all women.
So big difference from Macy's.
So I was told as soon as I got to beauty that I needed to soften the edges a bit.
Okay.
And turned out,
who told you that?
It was either, if I recall correctly, it was either my boss, the CFO, or the CHRO.
Okay.
But it was pretty high level. We were a small organization closest to a startup, and we were moving fast. And I was checked gently, but effectively.
Okay.
And then
And did that
later on,
how did that feel though? Like moving, like when someone says soften your edges, like, did you even know what that meant?
of course not. There was no language to it. What was different for me in Victoria's Secret Beauty was the women that modeled the way. And the CEO was just, the C suite was exceptional. We were there at a special time. And the CEO modeled that you can be fierce and you can be kind, that they were not
Beautiful.
mutually exclusive. And when we would go into stores, she would talk to everybody from the guy who was handling stock to the district manager to the sales associates. And we didn't leave on store visits until she spoke to every single associate. So I think what
Oh,
changed for me, even though I couldn't put language to it, Megan, I saw there was a different way by how they modeled it.
that's
And it
amazing to
became,
have a leader like that.
oh my gosh. And it was really the entire C-suite. And putting our light year language to it, they worked in abundance and they
Yeah.
weren't afraid to teach and they weren't afraid to give it away. And when you didn't know it, great. They
Yeah.
sat beside you and they taught you, which was very different than keeping it all to yourself.
Yes. Yes. Do you remember some of the things that you intentionally changed in order to soften your edges?
Oh gosh, I certainly had to listen more. Yeah.
Okay.
I was not a very
Yes.
good listener going in. I had to listen more. And we were a small outfit. And for me, that's where I learned influencing without authority. We were a really small group and we were all working toward the same North Star. So very few times in my life have you been with a team that's working that fast and we're so scrappy and you had to trust each other. So it was more, and you brought your partners in to make sure that you checked what you were doing and then you were able to go super fast. So the lesson was
Yes.
really was listen, was to socialize, humility in the sense of I wasn't the
Ugh.
smartest person in the room because I went from running big box to specialty and I didn't
Mhm.
know specialty. So I had to learn a lot really quick. And folks had to trust me and know who I was and what I was bringing to the table.
Mhm. Well, listening actually made it into my notes, but I didn't say it in your introduction of that was my experience of you in this board meeting of this very generous listening. And that is what helped you pivot then to ask the bigger question, the more powerful question. And you certainly showed up in this place of, all right, Laura knows what she's talking about, but it came from this very grounded confidence place.
Thank you.
And so, can you tell us more about your journey of how you're even able to do that or what you've learned along the way?
Sure. I think Victoria's Secret Beauty was where I was where if I, we'll use the word soften for now,
Yep.
was I knew where I had to soften a bit. And then as retail careers evolve, you get bounced around a bit, and sometimes in life you learn the lesson twice. So when I got laid off from Limited in Columbus, I got a call from some of my colleagues in Macy's, and they said, "Well, would you come back?" So I came back through Cincinnati, which was kinder and gentler, and I actually entered through HR. And then after a period of time, I got promoted and got transferred back to New York. And when I got transferred back to New York, I was a different version of myself in the same environment, my 20 something that I was in my 20 somethings,
Yeah.
with many of the same folks who were my colleagues and bosses in my 20s.
Wow.
So the many things I learned. And you learn that when you scratch the surface just a bit and when you're provoked, you get the same reaction. And I was sitting at a very high level. I came in at a group vice president. So I was one of two women at that table. And the tough environment still existed. And I was assigned an executive coach. And the executive coach was the one I referenced in the beginning. I was a high potential, and they assigned me new to this big role. I probably had a team of about 250. And Dr. Betty Orlandino was assigned to me, and she was the coach to the stars at Macy's. And I remember meeting her when she came in, and Betty's probably 5'8", 5'9", platinum blonde, spiky hair. She comes in a black pinstripe suit, introduces herself, shakes my hand, and she's got like a handshake of an NFL linebacker. And she looks me over. She says, "Okay, I'm your coach." And I'm thinking, "Oh boy, okay,
Here we go.
here we go, game on." Okay. And what I loved about Betty is, I'm a kid from outside of Queens. I mean, we're super direct by nature, and Betty was really direct. And her first play from scrimmage, after she and I chit chatted a bit, was she did a 360. So she asked a few questions, which I still have on my work desk today. And that was one of the most humbling moments of my entire life because there was who I thought I was and who the teams perceived me to be. I was called intense. I'm going to say 20.
And you didn't believe that you were intense?
I didn't know. I didn't think I was that intense. I'm coming off of Victoria's
Okay.
Secret Beauty. I was kinder and
Yeah.
gentler. I worked for the women. I had to soften the edges until Betty told me, no. The other quote, it still just stings, but I'll say it in my outside voice. They know you care, but you have to let your guard down.
That can feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I didn't know how to do that.
So then what did you and Betty start walking through then in order to, let's say, neutralize the intensity,
Yeah.
have you feel more comfortable letting your guard down? And even what did letting your guard down do?
I realized that many things, but when I walked back in that world, it was just a tough environment. So the armor came right back up. So I had to I had to go. And that was, acknowledging with my teams that I didn't have all the answers. Because a lot of what we were working on, this is when Macy's was changing all the nameplates, that we were coming together for the first time. And I didn't have all the
Mhm.
answers. And folks on my team were smart in very different disciplines. Each one brought something very unique to the table. And my job was really to run this orchestra
Mhm.
in a very different way and empower them to go out and take the meetings and empower them to come back with the ideas and empower them to work through what the troubles were. And part of my job was going back to where we started was influence. And I had to advocate and influence in a world that was very similar to the one that I had left years before.
Yes.
For me, it
Yes.
was working on my own self-confidence because here I am. I was still, gosh, probably, how old was I? Maybe 35, maybe a little older at that time. Uh, and I'm back in this seat,
Mhm.
not totally believing I belong there.
Okay. So was that the whole crux of the issue of why you felt, I can't admit to my team that I don't have all the answers. I'm being asked to lead these 250 people. Things are changing, right? We're a fairly new leadership team. We're still going through storming, forming, norming, right? Doing all those things. Was it ultimately self-confidence or even this idea of, I don't know that I belong here? Was that the idea of why the armor
All part of it.
was up?
Yeah, all part of it. And I think part of me still had something to prove.
Mhm. What?
I came back to this environment, and for some of the guys working there, I was still the 23-year-old they were patting on the head.
Okay. So proving that you weren't the 23-year-old
Oh
anymore.
yeah, oh yeah, and it
Yeah.
was a hard job.
Yeah.
It was a hard.
Even for our listeners, I'm not as familiar with retail. It feels like fun. We're talking about fashion and clothes, but it's a very numbers based business, right? Aren't you looking at numbers almost even by the hour of like what's selling, what's coming
Oh
in?
yeah, I mean my role is
Market. So can you even just explain a little bit about
yeah, I
that?
mean, my role, I was always on the outside until I ran stores a little later, but in this time, I'm running the outside, so at this time in Macy's, I'm running staffing and scheduling.
Oh gosh. Oh
All about
gosh.
numbers, it's just
Yeah.
forecasting stuff. Your productivity
Yeah.
per hour, how many associates you have on the floor, which looks different
Right.
by department, which looks different by store, which work
Yeah.
volume projections. So all of this
Right.
was your accuracy of numbers as
Yeah.
evidenced by, when folks went to lunch in Herald Square and you were short people in fine jewelry, you would
Right.
folks would be very quick to give you feedback.
I am sure. I'm sure. And you're doing all that against expected revenue.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So we get a lot of feedback. The staffing folks always got
Yeah.
a lot of feedback.
Yeah. I can only well
Yeah.
imagine. What were some of the things that you and Betty worked through? How did you build this confidence over time? How did you assert more authority, to use your word from earlier?
Yeah. I'll go back to listening
Mm.
because it was really listening and understanding what the many constituents wanted. So in staffing, you worked for everybody. You worked for the
Mhm.
agents, you worked for the buyers, you worked for the ops folks, you worked for the stores folks. We had our hands in the middle of everything. And it was really listening and understanding what that constituent wanted and how you could help them understand what they needed in the context of what was happening in the brand and making them feel seen and heard and making sure they met their objectives while you're meeting yours
Mhm.
and doing that, 35 times
Mhm. Yeah.
and bringing folks along for the journey because it was also super frustrating and that if something went wrong, we were always the first on the seat and you had to build resilience. Say, okay, I need to take a breath and not react.
Mhm.
Using the language we know today, I had to respond and not react.
Right.
But when provoked, I would go right back to reaction.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
became, okay, I hear you. Let me look at that and let me find out.
Yeah.
Right. So the power was in knowing the answer, but I didn't always have the answer at my fingertips.
Can you tell us more about what you were learning at that time?
It's funny because later in life, you learn to put language to it. One of the big lessons was intent versus impact.
Mhm.
So my guarded nature led other folks to be guarded.
Yes.
So then the
Yes.
whole team was guarded.
Yes. And then everyone kind of shuts down. Sorry, I don't want to steal your words. You keep going.
Hey, steal away. Yes. So I didn't realize how my little micro moments were setting macro tones for the team, and they were
Yeah.
taking their cue for me. So when I was defensive, they were more defensive. When I was combative, they were combative. When I felt threatened, they felt threatened. I had to learn to take the tone down.
Yeah. That's such a clear example. And then, especially for you as the executive, then you're not getting feedback. You're not getting the innovative ideas. People don't feel safe taking risks or speaking up. And then, so doesn't it even start to feel a little blah? We're dealing with complaints all day is about scheduling and we don't have any new ideas or anything refreshing to rally around, right? Because everyone's more in down momentum instead of upward momentum.
In fundamentally tough jobs.
Yes. That are always going to be tough every day.
So it's tough to get folks excited when you know you're in a job that's more of a grind. But yet on the flip side, we also held the keys to the kingdom. I mean, we were the closest to the customer. So if we did our job right and did our job well and were creative with our approach, I had very creative folks. Many who went on to lead businesses to be C's themselves, and they had solutions. I needed to listen to the solutions and give them the space to come to the table with that and let them make their
Yeah.
own mistakes. And we would fail fast and keep moving. It wasn't, we needed to try things and, not be so stuck. And part of the stuck was,
Yes. When you enter this listening mode and really want to understand these great ideas that your team wants to share, what did you have to do in order to slow down or even stop the story of, I don't belong here? People still think I'm 23. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. This feels like a really big job. Like it's easy to say, well, I will just listen more. But what were some of the things that you had to do to slow down some of those stories running in the background?
well, in my own head
Yes.
that I trusted. I had a few folks and mentors that I trusted who were the ones that brought me along the way. And when I would get stuck, I mean, here was something I wasn't very good at, but I had to learn to be good at it, was to ask for help.
Mhm. I still struggle with that every day. So I get it.
Same. And asked for feedback, right? But for me, I needed to ask for feedback from folks that I trusted. The first step, right? So
Mhm.
I had to really be thoughtful. And part of what Betty and I employed was when we would come out of that meeting, it was direct feedback on what could I have done differently.
Mhm.
What did
Mhm.
you observe? Like what worked, what didn't work? Where did you see?
Yeah.
That's just the learner that I am. If they were able to give me examples in those moments instead of these esoteric moments of you could have done more of this, could have done more of that. If they came to the table with examples, that was better for me to wrap my head around.
Absolutely. Do you remember some of the specific feedback that Betty gave you?
I think a few things. They are listening adjacent.
Mhm.
So they are watch body language and read body language because my defensive tell is there's nothing there.
Okay. Blank.
Oh, and for folks, you got to give them something. You got to give them something. And part of it was understanding my own body language. Part of it was reading the room and really being aware. There were times where I had to get through I was so intent on getting through my stuff
Mhm.
that you're not reading the room.
Right.
And if you're not reading the room, your stuff doesn't matter. You don't know
Yes.
what's landing. You don't know where to spend more time. All of these are listening adjacent.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest lessons from Betty was ask, don't tell.
Yes. Okay. Well, that goes back to the beginning because that was my experience of you asking these really powerful questions. So, how did you start practicing that?
I literally had to slow it down. I think there was a point in time where I had to sit on my hands
And just say, I'm not going to speak right now. I'm not going to speak right now. I'm not going to speak right now.
and I would wait. And I would wait for everybody else to go. You know, then it was my turn. So what was the worst thing that would happen, right, if I went last? Okay, either somebody said it or maybe it went on a little too long, but it's practicing restraint. It's understanding the impact of my language. Language matters. It's listening to understand and advising more and giving the
And what are some of those examples of when you ask a powerful question? When she says ask, don't tell, what are there go-to questions that you often use, or is it just in the moment, it's I'm going to ask a question instead of telling everyone how much I know about this topic?
think what I think what I've learned over time, and it depends on the audience, it's listening and it's very much in the moment. And I don't ever have to show off my credentials.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe it's because of the space I'm in, and maybe it's because of the board work. And I'm in that room because I want to be in that room, and because somebody wants me to be in that room because of what I can bring to that table.
I would actually argue it's your self-trust has grown, and so it is likely easier to be in that room and ask powerful questions instead of, "Oh, well, it's because of what people know of me." It's more about how you present yourself.
Thank you. For me, it's just different intent. I know the intent. If we think about that board meeting, I know the intent of the work. And when I
Uh-huh.
became a head of stores, that's when things radically changed. Because as an operator, I was a tool maker. When you're a head of stores, you have lives in your care.
Mhm.
Not that you didn't have lives in your care when you were an operator, but you're behind the scenes,
Mhm.
working the data,
Yeah.
working statistics, working the dashboards. And when I went into my first store, and this was when I was a head of retail for Oakley, and I used to do a lot of coffee chats, and I used to ask what you could do differently. And I realized that I had the keys to the Ferrari, and things that they were talking about that they thought that were all mired up. It was my group, and we could control that.
Mhm.
So just a different
Mhm.
sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that carries, to use your example of the board meeting, I also understand the responsibility of lives in our care.
Yes.
We serve the homeless. We serve those that
Right.
suffer from food insecurity. We literally have lives in our care.
Yes.
So I think that
Yes.
that helps me with the that helps ground me in intention, that I know
Yes.
who we're working for.
Right. Right. And then are able, yes, to move from that place. How would you define influence?
Excellent question. Being able to tell your story and having someone else be curious, there might be another solution, or there might be another way, or there might
Mhm.
be another point.
I love that. When you walk into the same board meeting, I shared my experience of you. What are you do you intentionally show up with influence? Do you intentionally show up with curiosity? How do you walk into that meeting and then also ask the powerful questions that get us to the highest outcome and the greatest good? What's your personal experience of that?
I show up with kindness and curiosity. And if
I
I
think that purpose perfectly sums you up. So that that makes sense to me.
Thank you. I stay grounded in kindness, right? And I stay grounded
Yeah.
in the mission. And, maybe I learned this at the body shop. It's all part of this continuum. But working in retail, you sold stuff. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way.
Yeah.
When I worked for lens crafters, I realized I worked for a business with purpose. That we
Mhm.
gave the gift of sight to folks that didn't have access to vision care. That carries a really different weight. And then when I worked for the body shop, we were an activist brand. And we did my keynote for that year for the body shop was find your why,
Mhm.
and overwhelm the stories that came back from the shop managers, from the district managers were really deep in terms of
Mhm.
why they do what they do. And one of my shop managers just nailed it. She said, I was born to serve. And I adopted her words because at the end of the day, when you strip it all away, we could put all of our professional nomenclatures on it, and we could have all of our fancy business language. If I look back, that's exactly who I was meant to be. And I hope that's what makes me effective in those boardrooms. I never forget I was born to serve.
To me, you present with a lot of feminine power, a lot of feminine groundedness. When you speak, the other people in the room really listen and they're like, Laura really has something to say. There's an aura of like, oh, okay, I'm listening right now. Do you feel that that is happening?
I don't.
Okay. All right.
I don't. My red lipstick is all part of me. It goes back to one of my very first bosses saying, own who you are. And that's just part of who you are.
Yes. Yes. Are there any other skills related to influence that you feel like you have practiced and honed over the years?
It's a practice. I think for me, it was just being comfortable in my own skin.
Hmm.
And that comes from, I mean, all the work that we've done with inherited legacies, right? There's all that stuff that was attached to me, good and bad, right?
Hmm.
I am my father's daughter. That's where the hard work and the loyalty come from and the work ethic. That's, I'm his kid. And he didn't intentionally mean to make me a perfectionist. But if I realize when we go back to that 360 moment, that was part of what was driving the bad behavior because I thought you had to be perfect and
Yeah.
you couldn't go unless you hit 100%. Well, one of my Italian bosses said, well, if you're waiting to hit 100%, you will never get there and you will stay still.
Yeah.
So it's lowered
Yeah.
the bar, not on your own personal work ethic and not on your own personal accountability or responsibility or the work product that you bring to the table. It's taking the shot when you're at 80% or you literally stay still.
Correct. I had an early boss say 80% is done
Well,
is better than 100% and unfinished.
I
I was like,
did.
okay, I got it. I know how to work with that.
Yeah. And that was part of the reprogramming and that it was good enough to try it. And great. Okay, let's reassess. And if it didn't work, then how can we fix it? But we were
Right.
close enough. We had what we needed to get going.
Yes. Yes.
Was so to answer your question, it was a lot of that inherited legacy work, and I had to shed what was pinned to me that really was either never me to begin with or I didn't need anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. So much growth. So
But
much
we didn't
growth.
have language to it, right? I mean,
Right.
now we have language to it. Now we're wiser.
Hmm.
And I'd like to think, on a just on a different path to help the next gen get there quicker.
Yes. Absolutely.
We covered the nonprofit work, which was truly, I think, allows me to take all of the tools that I had in my toolkit in a corporate world and apply it in a very different, impactful way.
Hmm.
And in this next chapter, it's all about giving it all back
Yeah.
because so much was poured into me. Megan, oh my gosh, I've had such great mentors and coaches and experiences. Never in a million years did I think going into this retail career that I would wind up where we are. But sure enough, I show up at an outreach. Josiah Haken, the CEO, is there one day. Suzanne Conrad, our Suzanne, is there. And he says, you two need to know each other because I think you're fabulous human beings. And Suzanne hugs me for what feels like 3 hours, but it's probably 20 seconds. And within 24 hours later, we've connected on LinkedIn. She's calling me on my cell phone and she says, I'm going to do this workshop in November. Are you in? And I just said yes.
And that's how we met. It's a good thing you said yes.
So we said yes, but it's right. It's being open to those moments and being open to the yes. And you don't have to know how it all comes together. And I think part of what drives me in this chapter is also faith, which I think I had to work. The other lesson, part of the armor was I had to work so hard because I had the plan. And then when the plan didn't happen, I was always sideways. And now the plan's like in pencil.
Right. Right.
And
Mm.
it's better than I thought, better than I
Yeah.
could have created.
Yeah.
Different for sure, way better. If you would have told me that I would have been a chief of anything, that was never,
Right.
on my
Right.
bingo card. If you would have told me I would be working with the homeless in New York City or doing this with you, right? It just
Yeah.
never would have dreamed it because I just didn't see it modeled.
Yeah. And then how much is possible when we step into that faith and surrender that we don't have to have all the answers.
Oh yeah,
We don't have to have it all figured out. And
but
there's so much joy just walking around all the time.
and just showing up.
Yeah.
But if you're open for it, there is just so much joy in the world that I would
Yeah.
rather live in faith and joy
Yeah.
than any place else. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of love if you just open your eyes.
Absolutely. Certainly something that can change everyone's life in an instant. It's just looking for it and noticing it.
And all part of why I'm grateful for you. I call
Yeah.
you my crazy ideas and you just say yes when I can fit it in with days that I'll be there. Okay.
Always works for me. Are you ready for a few quick fire questions?
Yeah, go.
All right. What does feminine leadership mean to you?
That means for me it's always meant leading with going back to my CEO from Victoria's Secret. It's being fierce and being kind
Yeah.
and being vulnerable and being able to create a safe environment for folks.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. What is the Laura secret sauce?
Oh gosh, it is my ability to listen and folks tell me a lot of things.
Hmm.
They tell me things they wouldn't normally tell others, and that's an honor and a privilege.
Yeah. Yes. What are you reading or listening to right now?
What I am listening to, well, I'm in the middle of 3 books right now. I still have to finish
It's
Renee
my
Br
life.
we're on strong ground. I'm almost done,
Yes.
but I listened to it first. Now I'm going back and reading it, and then I'm back to Diary of a CEO.
Okay.
Always one of my favorites that I've gone back
Yeah.
to listen to some of those episodes. I just his guests are so intriguing and so timely that
Yeah.
the world is changing so fast. I try and keep good energy and good news and good words in my universe, and I find him to be exceptional with that.
Love that. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and thank you for all of the things.
What do you say when your boss takes credit for the work that you did, or a coworker tries to call you out publicly? Download the exact scripts that you can use, the micro power moves of what to say in the moment. Stay in your own power and communicate clearly. The link is in the show notes below. Thank you so much for listening. I so appreciate your time. If you could please review this podcast and leave comments, I would love to hear from you directly. Have a great day. Bye.